I'm Aryeh Schwartz, and welcome to the Winsidr show, where it's all about the W. Today, we're talking the WNBA Finals. Specifically, we're talking about key players. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. This episode, we have a special guest, Alex Bazzell, NBA and WNBA Skills Coach, and he's going to help talk to us about specifics and some details of the key players in the 2019 WNBA Finals. Alex, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
So, Alex, you have one of the more interesting stories surrounding the league. So why don't you tell the folks kind of who you are and why people should know your name?
Well, I don't know if anyone should know my name, but yeah, I played from a young age, like anyone who loves basketball. I grew up around it. My dad put a ball in my hands at a young age. I had older siblings that played, so I was just naturally around the game quite a bit. I played in college, played at a low Division I in Kansas City, transferred to Division II, and then after that I played overseas in Germany for one season. And then, I came back home, and that's kind of when, personal training became more of a thing and individualized sports became a thing. Growing up, it was more about just playing as many sports as possible, which I still believe in that philosophy, quite honestly. But now it's taken more of a trend towards getting your kid into one sport at a younger age and making sure they develop their skills as quickly as possible. So it's kind of like right place, right time in terms of making it a career for me. But yeah, I came home and there were a lot of local kids that, wanted to train. So I actually planned on just training, some kids here in St. Louis and then training myself to go back overseas. I got back in April from my overseas season, and then things just kind of like took off. And it didn't make sense for me financially to go back overseas. And then I knew I wanted to train at a high level, as high as I could. So I figured if I started at a younger age, I could maybe get to my goals a little bit quicker. So that was back in 2014. So now fast forward 5 years later, I built up my clientele to where this summer I had 19 NBA guys come through. And then I work primarily with 3 WNBA players, quite a bit. Candace Parker being one of them, Gabby Williams being the other, and then, Nafisa Collier, who I actually date, being the third one. So it's just been kind of a whirlwind. I never thought I would get to this point as quickly as possible, but it's been a really fun ride.
Well, you also, I mean, not to put you, in the spotlight or whatever, but people might have recognized your face from during All-Star weekend. Anytime someone was saying hi to Kobe and his daughter, you were getting some daps also. So you might be also tagging along or working with one of the biggest names in middle school. Is it
Yeah.
middle school basketball, which is that's amazing for the women's game that like someone who's that young is getting the type of attention she's getting. Obviously the connections to her dad, but I have to ask, like, it's like no shade to you or anything, but it almost sounds crazy to be like, this guy's working with Kobe's daughter on basketball, right?
Right. No, it's very odd. I mean, so to give you an idea, growing up, Kobe was the guy I looked up to all the time. So I was always watching Lakers games. It was always him and Steve Nash were kind of like the 2 guys I always followed in the league. And then at one point, it was a huge rivalry of the Suns and the Lakers. So you kind of had to make a choice. You couldn't cheer for them both. So I chose Kobe and I kind of stuck with him. I wore 24. And it was just very odd because, I met him, I guess it was 2 years ago now. Nafisa was in town. I was in LA. All my NBA guys go out there for the summer. So I spend my whole, NBA off season out there. So she had come in town, and this was going into her senior year at UConn, and she was just training, and and Kobe actually hit her up to come down and work out in front of his girls team. So he actually coaches the entire seventh grade girls team. So we went down there. She worked out in front of him. Of course she did great, and then we had a long conversation afterwards with Kobe, and I kind of thought that would be it. And then I get a call about a month and a half later from a number that I didn't know, and I usually don't ever answer the numbers that I don't know on my phone, so I just kind of let them go to voicemail and see who it is later. It just so happened to be Kobe. So he shot me a text shortly after, like, "Hey, this is Kobe, hit me up." So I texted Nafisa because she had his number. I was like, "Hey, is this who I hope it is?"
Is
like,
someone pulling a prank on me?
Right. So yeah, that's him. So I gave him a call, and he's like, "I want you to come down and work out my girls for this weekend." So I went down there and worked them out, and I've been working with them consistently ever since. So it is strange because in my opinion, I think Kobe is probably the most skilled player to ever play. But it's like anything else. As a parent, I think he understands, and as a coach, he understands that sometimes they just need a different voice. It doesn't matter how much you know. At some point, he has to be able to just be dad, right? He can't be everything for Gigi. So I think he's done a great job with knowing exactly how much to help and how much just to sit back and enjoy it and be dad and be there for when she needs it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I don't think if my parents were even, I don't care what they're skilled in. I think everyone can kind of hear what you're saying and appreciate that. Let's flip it over back to the W though, real quick. So obviously, at the time of this recording, and by the time we publish it, it will be right before Game 4 of the finals, where DC has a chance to steal, or not steal, but run away with their first WNBA championship. Both teams are star-studded, but first of all, from your perspective as somebody who works with some of the biggest names, older names and up-and-coming names in the W, what trends are you seeing from these finals, and what things are kind of, when you're watching, you're going, oh, this is something that I need to incorporate when we're doing off-season workouts or whatever with the WNBA clients that you have?
Well, I think it's basketball ever since Golden State went on that big run. I think you're seeing more small ball where the 4s and the 5s in the league are more than capable to putting the ball on the floor, stretching the floor, knocking down threes consistently. And I think you see that with both teams actually in this finals. Is all 5 on the court are usually capable of stepping out and shooting a three. You have a couple exceptions like Alyssa Thomas, who has 2 torn labrums. Obviously, she can't step back there and let it fly. But almost everyone else who's coming into the game is a big threat to knock down a three. So it spaces the floor. It creates opportunities and disadvantages that the offense can kind of put pressure on the defense. So, as a skills trainer, I just look for little points of emphasis and where these actions are coming from on the floor and how I can constantly put my players in those actions and then work on different moves out of them.
Well, a perfect example of what you're talking about is Emma Miesemann, or Emma Threeseman, as they're calling her now during these playoffs. I mean, first things first, I don't think anybody who watches basketball or who paid attention to Game 3 can get the 3 plays at the beginning of the fourth quarter out of their head. I know I sent you the videos of it. And to me, the thing is, like, when we talk about defense and locking down, you have obviously Kristi Tolliver and Emma Miesemann are the 2 options of this play. And either one of those from beyond the arc, even with a hand in their face, is scary. Obviously,
Right.
Kristi, I feel like it's almost like you don't put a hand in her face because she lives for that. Like, she wants you to put a hand in her face so she can kind of give you that look afterwards. Like, that ain't going to stop me.
Right.
But what can you do? I mean, like I was saying, like, we hear a lot about go over the pick. But if you look at Positive Residual put out a tweet that had the video of those 3 plays played right after each other. And if you note, Jasmine Thomas, who's one of the top defenders in these finals and in this league, goes above, goes below. And it doesn't seem like there is an easy solution of what you're supposed to do there. So
Right.
for us stupid basketball people who are sitting here and yelling at the TV saying, we'll just go over the pick, we hear about that and stop. Like, talk to me a little bit about like why that's so difficult to stop and something maybe that you saw that someone could do better to stop.
Well, I think it's more difficult for Connecticut to stop because Jonquel is a natural rim protector, right? So her first instinct isn't get out there, hug the screener, make sure she doesn't have space to pop, which is what Miesman did in those first three possessions. Her natural instinct is, I got to pop back on this ball screen, make sure I don't give away layups. Her shot blocking is one of the biggest part of her games, and is what made Connecticut so good defensively. Is it allows the guards to put so much pressure on the ball because they know they have someone like Jonquel behind to kind of make up for their mistakes. But with Miesman in there, and then Elena in there, the floor is so stretched to where it puts Jonquel in kind of a bind that she has to kind of go against what's natural for her. So I think there's a couple options of what you do. Obviously, you have to, Jonquel's just got to get in her mind. She's just got to hug it and then just allow it. It's more on the person that's guarding Tolliver that she's got to get through the screen, because she's not going to have hardly any help or any hedge, or you just go ahead and blitz it, or you double the screen to kind of get the ball out of their hands to where, Miesman doesn't have time to really pop in space, to where Tolliver's kind of got to get it away as soon as she can. So that's what I've seen the most with those ball screens.
Well, talk to me briefly. I mean, one of the things that a lot of people will comment on is obviously there's differences between Elena Delle Donne and Emma Miesman's game, but in my mind, they kind of fit similar roles to a certain extent. And that's why it's so poisonous to other teams when you have both of them out there, because, they both have what we've been talking about, that ability to stretch the floor, pull out from behind the arc and hit the three. And when you have, obviously some smalls that are able to do that, but also bigs. Talk to me a little bit about the differences of Emma and Elena Delle Donne's games.
You know what? It is crazy because, we talk about Elena's year of 50, 40, 90. Emma actually did 50, 40, 90 also. She just didn't qualify for the amount of games because she came over late from overseas. So, I think their games are extremely similar. Now, I think Elena, puts more pressure. She can kind of put more pressure in terms of on the ball, what she can do with it. Now, Miesman's very, very skilled with the ball also. But I think Elena, it's just that ability, that first step is just a little bit quicker. So, a lot of times you see Elena when she's catching, they're closing out hard because she's such a great shooter. Same with Miesman, but Elena's first step, going left especially, is just a killer for people. And she actually has the ability to get in the lane and hang. She usually double pumps on a lot of finishes. So she's, with her length at 6'4", she jumps, and even if they time the jump right, she can hang and have the ability to kind of finish around them, which makes her unique in that instance. So I think everything else, they're very, very similar. I think, I think I put a tweet out maybe a month and a half ago about Emma being the most underrated player in the WNBA. And I think it's because she is so similar to Elena, but Elena's getting, all the attention, and rightfully so. I mean, I think she should have been unanimous MVP, but I think Emma, is all-star caliber level.
Oh, I completely agree. But you said something that was going to be my next question. Can you talk a little bit about Emma's off-ball movement? Because what I know, I was live in Connecticut, based in DC, but I was live in Connecticut for Game 3. And one of the things I was amazed of, even though I have to throw some shade, I was sitting like basically in the rafters is where they had the flow over. So maybe my views weren't the greatest, but the way that she moves off the ball, and one of the things that I think we've all noticed with Washington is it's very clear when they're, if you want to call it shook or whatever it is, when that offense gets stagnant and slows down, and you kind of have more of those Christy Tolliver, let me dribble in circles for a little bit and chuck up a shot.
Right.
It's very frustrating, and that's when the team really starts to struggle. But what Emma was doing this game was really there was only a 2-minute spread in the end of the first half when Connecticut really pushed the envelope. But Emma's ability to move off ball was just really impressive to me, even though I've watched her all season long do it. But her ability to do that, to keep the motion moving in this offense. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think for any player that wants to be a great scorer or be a consistent scorer, off the ball movement is probably the biggest part of doing that. And at a young age in basketball, your coach is always telling you got to move without the ball, you got to cut, you got to screen. But the great players know timing of all that, because that's the most important part. You're not just moving to move, you're moving in certain ways and you're moving at certain angles that are important. So, for instance, when Emma's off the ball, she has the unique ability to time exactly when her defender gets caught watching the ball too much, and she runs right off her back and she can get a post steal, or she can maybe get an offensive rebound. Those are all huge, and those are a big part of what makes Emma so successful.
I completely agree. It's scary to watch what she does, and it almost looks methodical. I mean, well, it is methodical.
Right.
But let's flip it over to Connecticut's side of the ball. Jonquel Jones, we've talked about her defense and how she's a natural born rim protector. We've talked about her ability to, do so many different things. But I want you to talk to me a little bit of her offensively. We saw game 1, they weren't really able to get her the ball. Game 2, it became a high priority to get Jonquel the ball in the low block in various other ways. And it looked like, obviously, Deladon goes out with that back injury, so the paint clears up a little bit for JJ. But talk to me, what you're seeing has been working for them, and kind of what they can do to get her more involved, because game 3, I mean, she was MIA for most of the game.
Right. Yeah, it was interesting because game 3, I don't even know if she attempted a shot in the first quarter. She maybe got one. So and that
I think she was like 0 for 2 from 3 in the first half or something like that.
Right. So and those were kind of forced in towards the end of the half, because I think she was frustrated that she wasn't, getting her touches. So I think, with her, the game she won, she got 24 shot attempts. Now, you're not saying that she needs to shoot that many. She got 9 offensive rebounds, and a lot of those were stick backs. But I think it's two things. It's one, in that second game, the guards were attacking, looking to score, and when that happens, her defender has to slide over and try to help, or try to get a block, or try to get a charge, and that opens up these offensive rebounds. I think last game they were caught shooting too many mid-range pull-ups that were contested, or too many long threes. So then it kind of negated her offensive rebound ability. But yeah, I think that even in the second half to start last game, they threw it right into her. She actually got tipped on a block, but got the rebound and then got an and one out of it. And then, a couple plays later, got another bucket. And then, again, then she went on kind of a cold streak of not getting the ball. So, those were 3 shot attempts that she had of her 8 within the first 2 minutes of the second half. And it gained some momentum for them, and then they kind of went away from it again. So, I think it's on, obviously your guards have to make an emphasis to get your best player the ball. It starts with your point guard and goes to your next leader, which is probably Alyssa Thomas. They have to make an emphasis to get Jonquel her touches, because, when she's more engaged in the game, it helps the energy level and on defense just as much as offense. So that, and then also Jonquel's got to demand the ball a little bit too. So it's a two-way street. You gotta have the guards that are willing to get you the ball, and then you gotta, at some point you have to pull everyone together and say, hey, I need the ball. I have a mismatch down here. You guys need to get me the ball and give me the ball in time. At some point as a leader, you have to be willing to say things that are a little uncomfortable at the times if you want to complete the task that you want to complete. So, that's what I've been seeing the most, because, when you're not getting her the touches, in game 1, she had 8 shot attempts. In game 3, she had 8 shot attempts. So, and those are the 2 games that you lost. So I think that, the blueprint is there, but the only issue is with Jonquel is she's not a player that you're going to just roll the ball to and get out of the way. Now, I think she's skilled, but when she struggles, it's when she's catching the ball about 8 feet from the rim with her back to the basket. But when you can get her a touch like a high-low to where she's already got the advantage, or like her offensive putbacks, or even setting a screen to get her a little advantage in the post, that's when she's at her best because she's so physically imposing and long. When she gets that advantage, you can't really make it up.
Well, that was something I wanted to ask. Obviously Emma and Jonquel are, comparing the bigs on these teams. They're very different style bigs. They have similarities, but they're very different. But something that I can't help but ask, and I want your insight on this is, watching the game, you see these like constant, pick and rolls at the top of the key between Emma and Christy. Why isn't that? Can you give us a little insight on why you think, maybe based on skill set or whatever it is? Like fans are asking me, they're DMing me, they're asking me, well, why doesn't Connecticut run that same play? Jonquel can hit the three. Obviously, she's maybe not high as percentage as Emma, but Jonquel has that ability to stretch it. So, like, what are the positives, the negatives of using her skill set in that way, I guess?
Well, I think that, with Alyssa out there, I think Alyssa's a much better playmaker than Jonquel in terms of if you want someone setting a ball screen and rolling. When you get her the ball at the top of the key with space, Alyssa's proven to be a handful. Same thing in transition. When she gets the ball in space, it's hard to argue that there's been anyone better in this finals than her. So I think getting her those touches are still important, and I think Jonquel, it's more about just again getting her the ball in a place that makes her comfortable. Now, Kurt's a great coach, so I'm sure they've worked on that, and that's the hard thing as a normal fan when you're not there at practice every day or you're not there at training camp. He sees where she's comfortable catching the ball, and I'm sure they've tried that out, and they've probably decided, hey, when we can get her the ball in these spots, that's when she's at her best. Same with Alyssa. When we get the ball to her in these spots, that's when we're at her best. So you have to be careful because when you put Jonquel in those situations, then Alyssa Thomas has to take a back seat. So you might gain something, but you also take something away that's been key for you in this play in the playoffs.
And getting them there. So I hear what you're saying. But you touched on something that I want to bring up. You talked about Alyssa Thomas and her being so effective with shooting and without shooting. Can you just talk a little bit more in depthly about we've gotten a lot of attention. We saw Holly Rowe and Rebecca Lobo do a little breakdown of her spin move, which was like straight out of NBA Street. Right. But talk to me a little bit. She's so effective without even shooting.
Yeah. Well, the biggest backbreaker for a lot of players in the WNBA or NBA or even high-level college basketball is overthinking. So, a lot of what I do is throughout the year, I'll do film breakdowns for my clients and just slow the game down for them, right? Make sure they're not overthinking it. And with Alyssa, with her 2 torn labrums, she has no choice but to play one way, right? She's not thinking, am I open for the shot? Do I need to drive? Do I need to move it? She's just playing to what she knows she can do. So I think it takes one step of the decision-making process out for her, and it's simplified the game for her. And she's at her best when she's getting downhill and making plays. So I think that's actually been beneficial for her. And I think hopefully she can. I don't know what the deal is with her shoulders. Hopefully she can eventually get those healthy and expand her game a little bit. But anytime you can simplify the game, that's obviously going to work in your advantage, and I think that's what she's done.
Well, I have to ask, as somebody who talk to me about what having that type of injury does to a player of her style, not just in the sense of what you just said, where it's like, oh, it kind of simplifies what she's able to do. But for those of us who don't know, maybe what that type of injury does to your shooting form or your dribbling, or like, what does that affect?
Well, the 2 biggest things, honestly, with shooting and rhythm, is the flow of your shot, and for you having hips and shoulders that are flexible and able to move and strong. Those are actually the 2 biggest parts of shooting mechanics and keeping a fluid motion. So when you take 1 or 2 of those away, it's going to be extremely difficult, and you're not going to be able to do it. So, with her, it's when you don't have shoulder movement or function or strength, it's nearly impossible, and that's why you see her shot the way it is. It's flat because she doesn't have the shoulder flexibility or strength to get the ball in the air. So I think that's really what's holding her back.
So I have to ask. It was a hot topic in the NBA over the years. I think only like 2 players have ever done it. She has struggled. Alyssa Thomas has struggled from the free throw line. Are you in the camp of when you like at a certain point, if your percentage dips below, move on over to Granny Smith style shooting? Because I just personally don't get why more players who don't have a great free throw percentage don't do that.
I don't know, because it's a lot of it is mental, and a lot of it is being okay with the way that it looks, like getting over the embarrassment of shooting a granny style free throw. Like, obviously, I think Rick Barry is the one that made it famous, and I think he actually had a son or something like that at Florida a couple years ago that shot granny free throws. But actually, her free throws have been fine. She's been, 10 for 12 in the finals. So, I wouldn't change anything with her. I think it just is what it is with her injury. So, in her instance, I would not. Now, if you're talking about, someone else in the NBA, maybe. I think it just depends on the personality and the mindset of that player.
So I'm gonna put you on blast real quick. Do you think Connecticut can pull out a win and force a Game 5 in DC?
No, no, I don't. Of course, it's no disrespect towards them at all. I think, the whole role player stuff has got extremely out of control. I mean, they have a great core of players, and I think they're going to be back next year. And but I think Washington being, they're the best offense that we've ever seen. And I think the only reason that they didn't win game 2 was kind of the shell shock of being without Elena for the entire game, basically. But they still had a chance. I mean, it was a 3-point game with 3.5, 4 minutes left in that game. So I think actually, like, Washington, what we don't think about is you have to be a little bit fortunate and lucky to win a championship. And Elena's injury obviously is not part of that, but if you think about, like, Emma coming late, it forced other players like Hawkins and Sanders to kind of take an expanded role. And then when she got back, they were confident in their abilities of what they could do. Same with Tolliver going down. Then Natasha Cloud had to really step up. And now she's playing with, supreme confidence. So I think every single player on that team is kind of clicking at an all-time high. And Elena's going to play. And just having her out there and having her presence, it's a calming effect on the entire team. And it doesn't matter if Elena's at 50% or 100%. She's going to require a ton of attention every time she has the ball, because you can't just sit there and be like, oh, she's hurt, so we don't have to give her as much attention. She's going to require just as much as if she was healthy. So it takes pressure off everyone. So I think that Washington takes it. Now, if Jonquel Jones gets going early and she gets touches early, you never know. But I think that Washington's just too good offensively, and I think that with how good their offense is, their defense is right up there with it, with Atkins and Cloud and Sanders. I think it's probably the most under talked about defensive player, best defensive player on that team. So there's no real weak spots. So I see them taking this game and taking the series.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, also, I like the way you referred to it as shell shock, because there was Holly Rowe was talking about how in the huddles at timeouts and at the stops of the quarters or whatever, Natasha Cloud was quiet. Christy Tolliver, who's normally chatting it up, was quiet. Everybody in that huddle, which is normally a very vibrant, talkative huddle, as we all know, was dead silent. And throughout the whole season, we've seen how this team really struggles. Not necessarily like with the play. They still play at a high level when Elena's gone, but it's that confidence that they lose when she's gone. So in game 3, when she came out, the whole time I'm sitting there and, she plays for a couple minutes and runs to the back. Everyone thought she ran to the locker room to get worked on. Was she out? Whatever. It turns out she's just biking on the little elliptical back there or whatever, trying to keep her back warm. And to me, I'm sitting there and I'm going, that's all you need to do if I'm Elena.
Right.
You just need to show up for a little bit, put your face on there, give your team the confidence. Okay, maybe you do that again out the half, but honestly, that's all it takes. And that it has got to be a huge confidence booster for Washington, just to know that all it really takes is Elena to be out there on the court for a few minutes to give the confidence for all these other players. I mean, everything, I love to disagree with my guests, but everything you said, as far as like, Natasha Cloud has really grown throughout this season. That was one of my concerns coming into the finals. Big fan of her as a person, but if you look back at last year's finals, I mean, she got worked and she wasn't playoff Cloud.
Right.
All these players are really, really stepping up. Talk to me, besides Emma, Christy, and Natasha, and obviously Elena, which player, because we do a Winsidr clutch player of the game. So for DC, we always like to stay away from the big names if we can. Who do you think is going to be the clutch player of the game?
I think if you're not going with, the main core of players, I think someone that's going to step up. So like, for instance, Hawkins had a huge game last game. She stepped up with 16 off the bench. I think Aryeh Atkins gets going again tonight. She had that huge game in game one. She played great in the finals last year. So I think she's due for a big night. She puts so much pressure on the defense when she's aggressive, and I think she's another player that she's kind of got sped up a little bit, especially last game. She got a little bit out of her element, so I think hopefully going back, watching the film, slowing it down, and simplifying it is going to help her. So I see her having a big game.
I appreciate it. And real quick, tell the folks before we sign off for the day where they can find you online, social media, and all that jazz.
Yeah. So primarily through Twitter and Instagram is probably my biggest tool in terms of teaching you can see exactly who I'm working with and what I'm working with them on is Alex Bazzell, Bazzell 24. That's my handle on Instagram and Twitter, so you can find me there.
Wow, you're lucky you got both of those. No one else apparently has your name. And actually, speaking of that, sorry to keep you a little bit longer. I just had to think of something. I saw your video where you and Mello were debating the travel. And so flip it over to the WNBA side. I don't know if you saw the play in question because I didn't have a chance to send it to you before. But to end the half in game 3, Christy Tolliver does a jump step, holds it, then spins around and does a double step to hit that that deep shot. In your mind, travel, no travel on that play?
I think actually it was a travel because I think her pivot foot was actually established. Now, if she were to take, like, for instance, one dribble right, left from there and then step through and shot it, I think it's obviously totally legal. But I think it was a travel. But the only issue is I don't think there's a clear understanding with all the new moves that have been incorporated, especially from the perimeter, on timing up, picking the ball up to shoot, and getting away with maybe an extra step or two, which I actually teach the move that she shoots all the time, where she pushes the ball out to the left and then lets it go. I actually teach that move, so that's totally legal. But I think once you add that step through, then it becomes a travel. But again, that's why I'm not refereeing. There's people that do that at a high level that know a lot more than I do. So I would call it a travel, though.
All right. Well, I had to get your take on it. So as we always say, we believe the players of the W and its community deserve the same in-depth analysis and respect that men's sports receive on a daily basis. Please consider joining our Patreon community to help support us in the hard work we do.